They say some women are born strong, others have strength beaten into them by life itself. Alara Whitlock was neither, until the day her own wedding became her execution. Picture this: a cathedral packed with the city's elite, a bride in white lace standing at the altar, and a groom who chose that sacred moment to destroy her in front of everyone. What happened next wasn't survival. It was something darker, something necessary. She ran into a blizzard that should have killed her, but instead, it forged her into someone unrecognizable. This is her story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far Alara's journey reaches. The cathedral smelled like lilies and old money. Alara Whitlock stood at the end of the aisle, her fingers trembling around a bouquet of white roses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The dress, God, the dress, weighed on her shoulders like a beautiful lie. Imported lace from Belgium, hand-stitched pearls that caught the light streaming through stained glass windows depicting saints she'd never believed in. Her mother had cried when she first saw it. Her father had written the check without blinking. Now, looking down that impossibly long aisle toward Damien Crowe, Alara felt nothing but the sick weight of inevitability. The organ music swelled. 273 people, she knew the exact count because her mother had obsessed over the seating chart for months, turned to watch her. The Vanderbilts, the Ashfords, the Morgans, old money and new money, and people who pretended their money was older than it actually was, all here to witness the merger, because that's what this was, really. A merger between her father's struggling shipping empire and Damien's family's pharmaceutical fortune. Alara's shoes clicked against marble. Step, 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 each one taking her closer to a future she'd agreed to in a moment of weakness, when her father had sat her down in his study and explained very calmly, very rationally, how close they were to losing everything. "Damien's a good man," he'd said, his hands shaking slightly as he poured himself a third scotch before noon. "His family wants the connection to our shipping routes. We need their capital. It's a good match, Alara. You'll be taken care of." Taken care of. Like she was a problem to be solved, a debt to be settled. She was halfway down the aisle when she caught Damien's expression. He stood at the altar in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, handsome in that cruel, aristocratic way that looked good in photographs. But his eyes held something that made her stomach drop. He was smiling. But it wasn't the smile of a groom seeing his bride. It was the smile of someone who'd just won a bet. A predatory, satisfied smile that made her want to turn and run. But she didn't. Because 273 people were watching. Because her mother was crying in the front pew. Because her father's entire financial future rested on her making it to that altar. So she kept walking. The ceremony began in a blur of Latin she didn't understand and traditions she'd never questioned. The priest, Father Morrison, who'd baptized half the families present, droned through the liturgy with the enthusiasm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Alara's hands were ice cold when Damien took them. His grip was tight. Too tight. "You look beautiful," he whispered, loud enough that the first few rows could hear, then quieter, only for her. Like a lamb dressed for slaughter. Her blood turned to ice water. The priest cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Damien Alexander Crowe and Alara Catherine Whitlock in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted." Alara's ears rang. The cathedral felt too hot, too small. She could smell Damien's cologne, something expensive and suffocating, mixed with the sickly sweet scent of too many flowers. "If any person can show just cause why they may not be joined together," Father Morrison continued, his voice echoing off vaulted ceilings, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Silence, heavy and expectant. Then Damien laughed. It wasn't a small laugh. It was loud, sharp, cutting through the sanctity of the moment like a knife through silk. Several people in the front rows shifted uncomfortably. Alara felt her face flush. "Actually, Father," Damien said, his voice carrying across the cathedral with practiced ease, "I have something to say." Father Morrison blinked. This isn't the... No, I think this is exactly the time." Damien released Alara's hands and turned to face the congregation. I mean, if we're talking about just cause, about whether this marriage should happen, shouldn't everyone know the truth? Alara's throat closed. Damien, what are you... The truth, he continued, his voice growing stronger, more theatrical, is that I'm standing here next to a woman I don't love. Don't even particularly like, if I'm being honest. He said it like he was commenting on the weather, casual, conversational. I'm marrying her because her father's company is circling the drain, and my family needs access to their shipping contracts before the whole thing goes belly up in bankruptcy court. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Alara stood frozen, her mind unable to process what was happening. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Damien, her father's voice, strangled and desperate, came from the front pew. Son, I don't know what you think you're... Oh, don't son me, Richard. Damien's smile widened. You knew exactly what this was. You sold your daughter to save your sinking ship. And I was willing to go through with it. Truly, I was. Until my lawyers informed me this morning that we don't actually need the marriage. We can just buy the shipping contracts directly from your bankruptcy trustees. For about 30 cents on the dollar, as it turns out. The cathedral had gone completely silent. Alara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Her mother made a small, wounded sound. So, here's the thing, Alara. Damien turned back to her, and his expression was almost pitying. Almost. You're not actually necessary anymore. This whole elaborate charade, he gestured at the flowers, the music, the cathedral. It's all just window dressing for a deal that's already dead. You son of a bitch, Alara whispered. Her voice came out broken, barely audible. Maybe, Damien agreed pleasantly. But at least I'm an honest son of a bitch. You want to know what I really think? I think you're boring, sheltered, completely unprepared for real life. You've spent your entire existence being your father's perfect little princess, attending the right schools, wearing the right clothes, saying the right things. You're a pretty ornament, Alara. That's all you've ever been. Someone in the crowd laughed. Just one person, but it was enough to crack something open. Then another laugh, and another. Alara's vision blurred. She was distantly aware of her father standing up, his face purple with rage or shame or both. Her mother was crying, really crying now, not the delicate tears she'd planned for the ceremony. Somewhere behind her, a bridesmaid. Jessica? Amanda? She couldn't remember, let out a nervous giggle. You know the saddest part? Damien's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. You actually believed this was real. You actually thought someone like me could want someone like you for anything other than a business transaction. Look at you. You can't even defend yourself right now. You're just standing there, taking it, like you take everything else in your pathetic, sheltered little life. The words hit her like physical blows, each one finding a soft place, a doubt she'd buried, a fear she'd never voiced. That's enough. Father Morrison's voice cracked like a whip, but he sounded uncertain. This is a house of what, Father? God? Damien laughed again. Give me a break. This is a house of money and power and people pretending to be better than they are. Just like this whole farce of a wedding. Alara looked down at her bouquet. White roses, perfect, pristine. Each one probably cost $50. Her hands were shaking so badly that petals were starting to fall. Boring, sheltered, an ornament. Is that what she was? I'm done here, Damien announced, brushing past her without a second glance. Enjoy the reception, everyone. The Whitlocks already paid for it. Might as well eat their money while you mock their daughter. He walked down the aisle like a man who'd just closed a successful business deal, his footsteps echoing in the terrible silence. Then the murmurs started. Did that really just... Poor girl. Heard their company was in trouble, but absolutely humiliating. She's just standing there. Alara's mother appeared at her elbow, her makeup running in black streaks down her face. Sweetheart, we should... She couldn't seem to finish a sentence. Her father was arguing with someone, Damien's father maybe, his voice getting louder and more desperate. The photographers who'd been hired to capture every beautiful moment of her special day were still snapping pictures, because of course they were. This was news now, tomorrow's headlines. The society pages would feast on this for months. 273 people, all watching her, waiting to see what she'd do, how she'd react. Whether she'd cry or scream or faint or... The bouquet hit the marble floor with a wet thud. Alara didn't remember dropping it. One second it was in her hands, the next it was scattered at her feet, white petals spreading like snow. She turned. Not toward her mother's clutching hands or her father's financial ruin or the 273 witnesses to her destruction. She turned toward the side exit. A small door set into the cathedral wall meant for clergy. She'd noticed it during rehearsal. "Alara, wait!" Her mother's voice, desperate and raw, but she was already moving. Her expensive shoes, custom dyed to match the dress, clicked against stone. Through the side door, down a narrow hallway that smelled like incense and old wood, past startled staff members who pressed themselves against walls to let her pass. "Miss Whitlock, are you—" She didn't answer, couldn't answer. If she opened her mouth, she was afraid nothing would come out but screaming. The rear exit opened onto a service alley. Gray November sky pressed down like a weight. Cold air hit her face, and she sucked in a breath that felt like swallowing glass. She could hear shouting behind her, people calling her name. Her mother, probably. Maybe her father. Maybe journalists who could smell blood in the water. Alara started running. The dress, that beautiful, ridiculous dress, made it almost impossible. The train tangled around her legs. The heels caught on uneven pavement. She kicked them off without stopping, left them lying in the alley like shed skin, barefoot on cold concrete, the lace of her dress catching on chain-link fences. Her veil, held in place with 24 pearl-tipped pins, streaming behind her like a white flag of surrender. But she wasn't surrendering. For the first time in her life, Alara Whitlock was choosing something for herself. Even if that something was just running, even if she had no idea where she was going. The city streets blurred past, people stared, a bride in full regalia sprinting down Fifth Avenue at 2 in the afternoon, her feet bleeding, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Someone tried to stop her, asked if she was okay, but she dodged around them. She didn't stop until her lungs burned and her legs shook, and she found herself at the edge of the city, where manicured streets gave way to something wilder. The mountain road stretched ahead of her, gray and unwelcoming. Behind her, her life, her family, her name. Everything she'd ever been or been expected to be. Ahead, nothing. Just trees and rock and sky that was starting to spit snow. A rational person would turn back, call someone, get help, go home and figure out how to pick up the pieces. But Alara had spent 26 years being rational, being good, being what everyone else needed her to be. And where had that gotten her? She started walking. The dress was already ruined, torn and muddy and stained with her own blood from where her bare feet had been cut on glass and stone. The November air bit through the thin fabric. She was completely unprepared for this. No coat, no shoes, no phone. She'd left it in the bridal suite because it didn't match her dress. The first snowflakes started falling as she reached the mountain trail. She should stop, should turn back while she still could, but something hard and cold had settled in her chest where her heart used to be. It whispered that going back was worse than going forward, that the humiliation waiting for her in the city, the pitying looks, the whispered gossip, the headlines, the slow dissolution of everything her family had built, was a kind of death anyway. At least out here, if she died, it would be quick. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt almost like relief. The trail narrowed. Wind picked up, driving snow into her face. Her feet had gone numb, which was probably a blessing given how cut up they were. The dress was heavy with melted snow, dragging her down. How long had she been walking? An hour? 2? The gray sky made it impossible to tell time. The city had disappeared behind her, swallowed by forest and mist. She stumbled over a root she didn't see, fell hard onto frozen ground. Lay there for a moment, gasping, her cheek pressed against ice-crusted leaves. Get up. The voice in her head sounded like her mother's, always commanding, even in crisis. Whitlocks don't quit. Whitlocks don't give up. But what was she even trying to do? Where was she going? She didn't know, didn't care. Alara pushed herself to her hands and knees. The world spun. When had she last eaten? Breakfast? No, she'd been too nervous for breakfast. Dinner last night? She couldn't remember. The snow was falling harder now, real snow, the kind that meant business. She could barely see 10 feet ahead. A smarter woman would be terrified. Alara felt nothing, just cold. just tired. She kept walking. The trail was barely visible now, buried under fresh powder. Trees closed in on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. Her breath came in ragged gasps that turned to ice crystals in the air. Boring, sheltered, an ornament. Damien's words circled in her head like vultures. Was he right? Had she ever done anything that mattered? Anything real? Her entire life had been a series of boxes other people built for her. The right schools, the right friends, the right clothes, the right smile, the right career, working at her father's company, of course, in a position that required her to do nothing but look professional at board meetings. She'd never questioned it, never fought back, never wanted anything different. Until today. Today, she wanted to disappear. Her legs gave out. This time when she fell, she didn't get back up. The snow was almost soft, in a way. Cold, but soft. Like a bed. She could just lie here for a while. Rest. Close her eyes. The wind howled through the trees. The sound reminded her of the laughter in the cathedral. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. Alara didn't hear it. She was already gone, sinking into a darkness that felt almost warm. She didn't know she was dying until someone stopped it from happening. The first thing she felt was pain, sharp, burning pain in her extremities, as if someone had set her hands and feet on fire. She tried to scream, but her jaw was clenched shut, her muscles locked. "Stop fighting!" A man's voice, rough and unfamiliar. "You're going into shock. Let it happen." Let what happen? Death? Was that what was happening? Something warm pressed against her lips. Liquid. She choked on it, tried to spit it out. "Swallow or I'll pour it down your throat." Not a threat. Just a statement of fact. She swallowed. The liquid burned all the way down, some kind of broth, salty and strong. Slowly, painfully, Alara became aware of her surroundings. She was inside. Somewhere small and dark and warm. A cabin? The air smelled like wood smoke and something animal. Leather, maybe, or fur. She was no longer wearing the dress. That realization hit her with a spike of panic. She was wrapped in blankets instead, rough wool that scratched against her skin. "Where?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "My cabin. About 6 miles from where I found you half dead in the snow." The man moved into her limited field of vision. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Face weathered by sun and wind, with a scar cutting through one eyebrow. Dark hair pulled back in a knot. Eyes that assessed her with the cold practicality of someone examining a half-frozen animal. "You're lucky I was checking my trap lines. Another hour and you'd be dead." Alara tried to sit up. Her body refused to cooperate. "Don't." He pushed her back down without gentleness. "You've got mild hypothermia and frostbite on 3 toes and 4 fingers. Moving around is a bad idea." "My dress? Ruined. Cut it off you. It was either that or let you die in wet fabric." He said it like he was explaining the weather. Horror and shame washed over her. This stranger had undressed her, seen her completely vulnerable. And she couldn't even remember it. He must have read something in her expression because his mouth twisted. "Relax, princess. You're not my type. I was trying to save your life, not cop a feel." Princess. The word hit her like a slap. "Don't call me that," she managed. "Then tell me your actual name." He stood, moving to a wood stove in the corner. The cabin was tiny, 1 room, maybe 12 feet square. A bed, a table, shelves lined with supplies. A single window showed nothing but white. "Alara, Alara," he repeated, testing the weight of it. "You got a last name, Alara?" She hesitated. If she said Whitlock, would he recognize it? Would he know about the wedding, the humiliation? "Does it matter?" she asked instead. He shrugged. "Not really. I don't care who you are. I care whether you're going to survive the next 48 hours without losing body parts." Such a casual assessment of her mortality, like she was a math problem to solve. "How bad is it?" she heard herself ask. "Bad enough." He poured more of the broth into a cup. "You ran into a November blizzard in a wedding dress and bare feet. What the hell did you expect?" So he knew about the dress. Of course he did. It had probably been impossible to miss. "I wasn't expecting anything," she said quietly. He looked at her then, really looked, like he was trying to figure out what species of stupid she was. "You were trying to die." It wasn't a question. Alara didn't answer, didn't need to. Well, you failed. He brought the cup over, held it to her lips. Drink. Your body needs calories and warmth. She drank because she didn't have the energy to fight. The broth tasted like venison and herbs and wood smoke. What's your name? She asked when the cup was empty. KL. That's it? Just KL? That's it. He set the cup aside and checked her hands, unwrapping the bandages with efficient movements. His fingers were rough, calloused, but surprisingly gentle. You're going to lose at least one toenail, maybe two. The fingers will probably be okay if we're lucky. Lucky, Alara repeated. The word felt foreign. Yeah, lucky I found you. Lucky the storm's too bad for me to take you back down to town. Lucky you get to stay here and learn what actual cold feels like. He rewrapped her hands with clean cloth. 3 days minimum before this blizzard clears, probably longer. 3 days. Panic fluttered in her chest. You should shut up and conserve energy. Kyle stood, moved back to the stove. Whatever you ran from, it's still going to be there in 3 days. The difference is whether you face it with all your fingers or as an amputee. The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it felt almost refreshing. No pity, no false comfort, just facts. Why did you save me? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment, stirring something in a pot. Because I could, he finally said. Out here. That's reason enough. Outside, the wind screamed. Snow rattled against the single window like thrown sand. The cabin was warm, almost unbearably so after the cold, but Alara found herself shivering anyway. She was alive. She didn't know if that was good or bad yet. Kyle brought her more broth, fed it to her in silence. Then he checked her feet again, his expression giving nothing away. Sleep, he ordered. Your body needs to heal. I'm not tired. I don't care. Sleep anyway. He moved to the far side of the cabin to a chair by the window, pulled out a knife and a piece of wood and started whittling. The scrape of blade on wood was rhythmic, almost soothing. Alara watched him work. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, creating something from nothing, finding purpose in simple action. When had she last created anything? The thought made her throat tight. Kael? What? Thank you for saving me. He didn't look up from his carving. Thank me by not dying in my cabin. The paperwork would be a nightmare. Despite everything, Alara felt her mouth twitch. Almost a smile. Almost. She closed her eyes and let the warmth and exhaustion drag her down into sleep. When she woke, hours or maybe days later, the storm was still raging and Kael was still there, keeping watch. And for the first time since standing at that altar, Alara Whitlock felt something other than shame. She felt curious. What happened next? What came after the running, after the nearly dying, after the being saved? She didn't know, but for the first time in her life, that felt like possibility instead of failure. The first full day, Alara mostly slept. Her body demanded it, pulling her under every few hours into a heavy, dreamless void that felt more like unconsciousness than rest. When she surfaced, Kael was always there, checking her bandages, forcing more broth down her throat, adjusting the blankets with the same impersonal efficiency he might show fixing a broken trap. He didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, didn't seem to need conversation the way normal people did. It unnerved her. By the second day, the worst of the hypothermia had passed, but the frostbite remained a dull, throbbing presence in her extremities. Kael unwrapped her hands that morning with the same clinical detachment he'd shown before. How bad? She asked, not sure she wanted the answer. You'll keep all your fingers. He examined each one, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. The toes are a different story. 2 on your left foot are black at the tips. We'll know in a few days if the tissue's dead or just damaged. And if it's dead, then you lose them. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Better 2 toes than your whole foot. Alara stared at the rough wooden ceiling. Somewhere in the city, people were probably still talking about her. The runaway bride. The Whitlock girl who lost her mind. She wondered if anyone was looking for her or if they'd already written her off as a cautionary tale. You want to tell me what happened? Kael asked, breaking his usual silence. Not particularly. He shrugged, started rewrapping her hands. Your business. Just seems like a hell of a thing. running into a blizzard in a wedding dress. Maybe I like dramatic exits. Maybe you like being stupid. He tied off the bandage with a sharp tug that made her wince. Rich girl problems, I'm guessing. Daddy cut off your credit cards? Fiancé cheated? The casual cruelty of it made something hot flash through her chest. You don't know anything about me. I know you almost died because you couldn't handle whatever bullshit you were running from. I know you're soft, weak, never spent a day in your life doing anything harder than deciding which dress to wear. He stood, moved to the stove. How close am I? Alara wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that there was more to her than that. But the words stuck in her throat because he wasn't wrong. Not really. He humiliated me, she heard herself say. At the altar, in front of everyone, called me worthless, an ornament, said I was boring and sheltered and completely useless. Her voice cracked. And the worst part is, he was right. Kale poured coffee from a battered pot, the smell rich and bitter. So prove him wrong. What? You heard me. He brought her the cup, helped her sit up enough to drink. You don't like who you were. Become someone else. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. He settled back into his chair, started sharpening a hunting knife with long, practiced strokes. You think I was always this? Living alone on a mountain, setting traps, surviving storms. The blade scraped against wet stone. I used to have a different life, different name, different everything. Then that life went to hell, and I had a choice, stay broken or build something new. Alara sipped the coffee. It was strong enough to strip paint, but the warmth felt good. What happened to your old life? Doesn't matter. It's dead. The knife gleamed as he tested the edge against his thumb. Point is, you get to choose. Go back down that mountain and crawl back into whatever cage you escaped from, or stay dead and see what grows in your place. I don't know how to do anything. You said it yourself, I'm soft, weak. Yeah, you are. No comfort in his voice. No reassurance, just fact. But soft isn't permanent. Weak is just a starting point. He stood, walked to the door. Storm's letting up a bit. I need to check the traps before dark. You stay here, keep warm, try not to die while I'm gone. Wait. Panic fluttered in her chest at the thought of being alone. What if something happens? Kale pulled on a heavy coat, wool and leather worn soft with age. Then you handle it. There's firewood by the stove, water in the barrel. You need to piss, there's a bucket. He gestured to a corner she'd been trying very hard not to think about. I'll be back in 2 hours, maybe 3. I can't. My hands. Figure it out. He opened the door and cold air blasted in, making the fire dance. Or don't. Either way, it's your problem, not mine. Then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Alara sat in the sudden silence, her heart pounding. The cabin felt enormous without him in it, empty. The wind rattled the windows and she jumped, coffee sloshing over the rim of the cup. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. When had she ever been alone? There had always been someone, her mother, her father, maids, assistants, friends. Damien. Always someone to handle things, to make decisions, to solve problems. The fire in the stove crackled. She watched the flames through the iron grate, mesmerized by their movement. The coffee cup was getting cold in her bandaged hands. She looked at the stove, at the firewood stacked beside it, at her own useless wrapped hands. Figure it out, Kyle had said. Alara set down the coffee and stood. Her legs shook. Whether from weakness or fear, she couldn't tell. The blankets fell away and she realized she was wearing clothes that weren't hers. Men's thermal underwear, rough wool socks, a flannel shirt that hung to her knees. Everything too big, everything borrowed. She made her way to the stove on unsteady feet. The fire was burning low. She could see that much. And there was wood. The equation was simple, even if she'd never actually done it herself. She tried to pick up a log with her bandaged hands. It slipped, crashed to the floor, and she bit back a cry of frustration. Try again. This time she wedged the log between both palms, held it against her chest. Awkward, clumsy, but she got it to the stove. Opening the iron door was harder, hot even through the bandages. She fumbled with the handle, finally got it open. The log fell into the flames with a shower of sparks. She'd done it. Such a small thing, such a stupid, simple thing that any child could do. But Ilara stood there staring at the fire she'd just fed and felt something shift in her chest. She'd done it herself. When Kael returned 3 hours later, shaking snow from his coat and hauling a dead rabbit by its hind legs, he found her sitting by the stove, 3 more logs burning, the cabin warm. He looked at the fire, looked at her. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face, but it was gone before she could be sure. "You'll lose less heat if you don't pack them so tight," he said, hanging the rabbit from a hook. "Airflow matters." Not praise, just instruction. But Ilara found herself smiling anyway. The days began to blur together, marked only by the rhythm of survival. Wake, eat, tend the fire. Sleep, wake again. Kael moved through each task with mechanical precision, and slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening, Ilara began to move with him. He showed her how to pack the stove properly, how to bank the coals at night so they'd last until morning, how to melt snow for drinking water, and why you never ate it straight because the cold would steal heat from your core faster than the water could hydrate you. "Everything's a transaction," he said, demonstrating how to adjust the damper. "Heat for warmth, calories for energy, effort for survival. You don't get anything free up here." Her hands were healing. The bandages came off on day 4, revealing red, tender skin, but all 10 fingers intact. The toes were worse. 2 of them black and dead-looking, but Kael said they'd probably stay attached. "Probably?" she'd asked. "Probably. I'm not a doctor. If they start to smell or go green, we've got bigger problems." Comforting. But he taught her to wrap them herself, to check for signs of infection, to recognize the difference between healing pain and dangerous pain. "You're responsible for your own body," he said. "Nobody else is going to monitor this for you." On day 6, he handed her a knife. It was smaller than the one he used for hunting, a fixed blade maybe 4 inches long, the handle wrapped in leather cord. The weight of it felt wrong in her palm. "What's this for?" "Whatever you need it for." He was cleaning the rabbit he'd brought in that morning, his hands red with blood. Cutting, carving, defense. A knife is the most important tool you own. Lose everything else, but keep your blade. Ilara turned it over, watching light catch on the edge. "I don't know how to use it." "Then learn." He gestured at a piece of wood on the table. "Start by carving something. Doesn't matter what, just get used to how it moves." She sat, stared at the wood, at the knife. "I don't know what to make." Kael didn't look up from his work. "Make whatever comes to mind. Or don't. Sit there and stare at it until you're bored enough to try." It took her an hour of sitting before she pressed blade to wood. The first cut was tentative, barely more than a scratch. The second went too deep and gouged a chunk out. The third slipped and nearly caught her thumb. "Hold it like this." Kael appeared beside her, repositioning her grip. "Cut away from yourself. Always away. Control the blade with small movements, not big ones." His hands guided hers through a proper stroke. Then he let go and went back to butchering the rabbit. Ilara cut and cut and cut. By evening, she had something that might generously be called a spoon. It was ugly and asymmetrical and rough, but she'd made it. "It's terrible," she said, holding it up. "Yeah," Kael glanced at it. "Make another one tomorrow. It'll be less terrible." That night, he cooked the rabbit in a pot with wild onions and some kind of root vegetable she didn't recognize. The smell made her stomach growl, a sound that would have embarrassed her a week ago, but now just seemed practical. "You need to eat more," Kael said, ladling stew into wooden bowls. "You're still running a calorie deficit." "I'm eating constantly." "Your body's been in crisis mode. Takes fuel to recover." He handed her a bowl and a piece of flatbread he'd cooked on a stone by the fire. "Besides, soft life means soft calories. Your system's not used to burning this much just staying alive." Ilara ate. The stew was gamey and strong, nothing like the carefully seasoned meals she was used to, but it was good. Real. Honest. "Tell me about your traps," she said between bites. Kael raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want to know. You check them every day, sometimes twice a day. How do they work?" He studied her for a moment, like he was trying to figure out if she was serious or just making conversation. Finally, he started talking. "Snares are simple. Wire loop suspended over a trail. Animal walks through, triggers the loop, gets caught. Spring snares use a bent sapling for tension. Animal gets caught, sapling releases, yanks them off the ground. He soaked bread in his stew. Deadfalls are different. Heavy log or rock balanced on a trigger stick. Animal goes for the bait, knocks the trigger, weight falls. That sounds cruel. It's survival. Cruel doesn't enter into it. His voice was flat. You want to eat, something else has to die. That's the transaction. What about fishing? Farming? Winter Mountain. No fish moving under the ice unless you want to spend hours at a hole praying for luck. No crops growing in frozen ground. He gestured around the cabin. You see a greenhouse, solar panels, running water. This is it. This is what's available. You use it or you starve. Elara absorbed that, tried to imagine setting a trap, checking it, finding a dead animal and having to skin it, clean it, cook it. Her stomach turned. I could never do that. You could if you were hungry enough. Kale finished his stew and stood to refill his bowl. People think they know their limits until survival strips away the choice. Then they find out what they're actually capable of. And what are you capable of? He looked at her then, really looked, and there was something in his eyes that made her wish she hadn't asked. Something dark and old and finished. More than I want to be, he said quietly. Then he grabbed his bowl and went back to his chair, ending the conversation. That night, Elara dreamed of traps, of being caught in wire loops, suspended in the air while something watched from the darkness. She woke gasping, sweat-soaked despite the cold. Kael was awake, sitting by the window with a cup of something hot. He didn't ask if she was okay, just watched the darkness outside. Can't sleep? She asked, her voice rough. Don't need much. He took a sip. Old habit. From what? From before. She waited, but he didn't elaborate. The wind outside had picked up again. Another storm rolling in. Kael? What? Why do you live like this? Alone, cut off from everything. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because out here things are simple. You're cold, you build a fire. You're hungry, you hunt. You're tired, you sleep. No politics, no lies, no people pretending to be something they're not. He set down his cup. The mountain doesn't care who you were, only what you can do. That sounds lonely. It is. He said it without self-pity, just fact. But lonely's better than surrounded by people who want something from you. Elara understood that more than she wanted to admit. She pulled the blankets tighter and watched the pre-dawn darkness with him until the sky began to gray. By the second week, the storm had finally broken. The sky cleared to a hard, brilliant blue that hurt to look at. Snow covered everything in drifts that came up to the cabin's windows. We're snowed in for a while, Kael said, checking the door. It opened maybe 6 inches before hitting a wall of white. Another week minimum before the trails are passable. Another week. Elara didn't know if that was good or bad. What do we do? We dig out, reinforce the roof, check the stores, make sure the chimney's clear. He pulled on his heavy coat. And you're going to help. My toes are healing fine. You're mobile, you've got working hands. Time to earn your keep. He opened the door far enough to squeeze through, then started digging with a wide, flat shovel. Snow flew in controlled arcs. After a moment, he thrust a second shovel through the gap. Well, you coming or staying? Elara looked at the shovel, at the wall of snow, at her borrowed clothes and healing feet. She took the shovel. The cold hit her like a wall. Even bundled in Kael's spare coat and boots 3 sizes too big, the mountain air cut through everything. Her breath came in white clouds. Her face went numb in seconds. Dig, Kael ordered. Rhythm matters. Don't tire yourself out in the first 5 minutes. She drove the shovel into snow that was lighter than she expected, but still heavy enough to make her arms burn. Lift, throw, repeat. Her shoulders screamed, her back ached. Sweat broke out under the coat despite the freezing temperature. Slower, Kael said, not looking at her. You're fighting it. Let the weight do the work. She tried to match his pace. Failed. Tried again. After 20 minutes, her arms felt like lead. After an hour, she wanted to cry. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because Kael didn't stop. And some stubborn part of her refused to be the first to quit. They cleared a path to the woodshed, to the small outhouse she'd been avoiding thinking about, to the trapline trail. When they finally stopped, the sun was high and Alara's entire body trembled with exhaustion. "Inside," Kael said. "Warm up, eat something." She stumbled through the cleared path, fell through the door, and collapsed by the stove. Her hands were blistered under the gloves. Her feet throbbed. Everything hurt. Kael came in behind her, barely winded. He heated up leftover stew and brought it to her. "You did good," he said. The words surprised her. She looked up, trying to find sarcasm in his expression and finding none. "I was slow. Weak." "Yeah, but you finished." He crouched beside her, checked her hands. The blisters were red and angry. "This is going to hurt more tomorrow." "Great. Pain means you're building something. Muscles, calluses, strength." He stood. "Rest now. Tomorrow we do it again." "Again?" "Snow keeps falling. We keep digging. That's how it works." Alara groaned but found herself almost smiling. The pain felt earned, real, nothing like the empty ache of standing at that altar. That night, her hands hurt too much to hold the knife. Kael wrapped them in salve and cloth without being asked. "You'll adapt," he said. "Body's tougher than you think." She hoped he was right. The days developed a pattern. Wake before dawn, check the fire, eat, work. The work varied, digging snow, splitting wood, maintaining traps, repairing gear. Kael taught her each task with minimal instruction and expected her to remember. "I'm not going to hold your hand," he said when she asked him to show her the proper way to split wood for the third time. "Figure it out. Make mistakes. Learn." So she made mistakes. The axe bounced off logs. The fire went out because she forgot to tend it. She cut herself with the knife more times than she could count. But slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, things started to click. The rhythm of the axe, the angle of the blade, the way to bank coals so they'd last through the night. Her hands developed calluses. Her arms grew stronger. Her feet healed enough that she could walk the trapline with Kael, watching him check each snare with practiced efficiency. "Why do you set so many?" she asked one morning as they trudged through knee-deep snow. "Redundancy. Some catch, some don't. Weather changes. Animals change routes." He knelt by a snare that held a small white hare, its body stiff with cold and death. "You can't control nature. You can only stack the odds." He reset the trap with quick movements, then added the hare to the game bag. "Want to try the next one?" he asked. Alara stared at the dead animal, at Kael's blood-stained gloves, at the wire snare waiting ahead on the trail. You don't have to want to. You just have to do it." He stood. "Your choice. But winter's long, and I'm not feeding you for free forever." The words stung, but they were fair. She followed him to the next trap. It was empty, thank whatever powers existed. Kael showed her how to check the tension, adjust the loop, disguise the wire with snow. "The animal has to believe it's walking into nothing," he explained. "Any hesitation, and they'll avoid it." "So you're lying to them." "I'm surviving. They're surviving. Sometimes those things are the same." He moved to the next trap. "You want to apply human morality to it? That's your business. But the rabbit doesn't care about your feelings when it's eating grass. That's bleak. That's honest." He glanced back at her. "You spent your whole life surrounded by pretty lies. Time to see what truth looks like." The next trap held a rabbit. Still alive, thrashing against the wire around its neck. Its eyes were wild with terror. Alara froze. "Kill it," Kael said. "What?" "It's suffering. Kill it." He held out a knife. "Quick and clean. Here." He pointed at the base of the skull. One thrust, brainstem, instant. "I can't." "You can. You just don't want to." His voice was hard. "But it's in pain because of my trap. Least we can do is end it fast." Alara looked at the rabbit, at the knife, at Kael's impassive face. She took the knife. Her hand shook. The rabbit thrashed harder, sensing danger. "Quick," Kael said. "Hesitation makes it worse." She pressed the blade to the spot he'd indicated. The rabbit's fur was soft under her glove. Its heart beat so fast she could feel it. "I can't," she whispered. Kael took the knife from her hand and killed the rabbit in one smooth motion. Its thrashing stopped instantly. "Next time," he said, cleaning the blade on snow, "you don't get a choice." He added the rabbit to the bag and moved on. Alara stood there, staring at the small body. at the blood on the white snow. She'd failed. But Kael's words echoed in her head. Next time. There would be a next time. And the time after that. Until she could do it. Until weakness became capability, became strength. She caught up to him at the next trap. They worked in silence the rest of the morning. That afternoon, Kael showed her how to skin and butcher. She watched his hands move with practiced precision, pelt separated from flesh, organs removed and sorted, meat cut into portions. "You're watching," he said without looking up. "Not learning. There's a difference." "I'm trying. Try harder." He gestured at the second rabbit. "This one's yours." She stared at the small corpse. "I don't know how, so figure it out. You watched me do one. Use your brain." He stood, wiped his hands. "I'll be outside. When I come back, I want to see progress." Then he left her alone with a dead rabbit and a knife. Elara's hand shook as she picked up the blade. The rabbit's fur was matted with blood from the snare. Its eyes were open, glassy, and empty. She remembered Kael's movements. The first cut along the belly, shallow, just through the skin. She cut, too deep. Blood welled up. She jerked back. Try again. This time, shallower. The skin separated. She worked her fingers under it, started pulling. The pelt tore. "Damn it," she muttered. By the time Kael came back, she had something that resembled butchered meat, if you were generous and squinted. The pelt was ruined. The cuts were uneven. She'd nicked the intestines and contaminated some of the meat. But she'd done it. Kael examined her work without comment. Then he took his own perfectly butchered rabbit and set it beside hers. The difference was humiliating. "What did you learn?" he asked. "That I'm terrible at this." "What else?" Elara looked at the mangled rabbit. "That I need to go slower. Pay attention to the layers. The pelt has to come off clean or it's worthless." And I shouldn't have cut so deep on the belly. Should have just scored the skin." Kael nodded. "Tomorrow you'll do better. Next week, better than that." He gathered both rabbits. "Meat's still good. We'll eat tonight. The pelt's trash, but that's the cost of learning." It was the closest thing to encouragement she'd gotten from him. 3 weeks into her stay, the weather finally cleared enough for a real thaw. The snow began to melt in earnest, revealing the landscape beneath. Kael spent the morning checking the cabin's exterior, looking for damage. "Trail should be passable in a few days," he said over breakfast. "You'll be able to leave." Elara's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Leave. Go back down the mountain. Return to what?" "What's waiting for you down there?" Kael asked, reading her expression. "I don't know," she admitted. "My family. The fallout. Everyone knowing what happened." "You care what they think?" She stopped. Did she? A month ago, the answer would have been yes. Absolutely yes. Her reputation, her family's name, what people thought, it had been everything. Now? "I don't know," she said again. Kael drank his coffee. "Then you're not ready to leave." "What? You heard me. You go back without knowing who you are or what you want, you'll just end up in another version of that wedding." He set down his cup. "The mountain stripped you down to nothing, gave you a chance to build something new. You gonna take it or waste it?" Elara looked at her hands. They were rougher now, marked with calluses and healing cuts. Hands that could split wood and set traps and skin rabbits. Hands that belonged to someone she was still figuring out. "I want to stay," she heard herself say. "Not forever, but longer. Until I know." "Know what?" "Who I am when no one's watching. When there's no expectations, no performance." She met his eyes. "You said the mountain doesn't care who you were. I want to find out who I can be." Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he stood and grabbed his coat. "Better learn to hunt then," he said. "Can't live up here without pulling your weight." He tossed her the rifle from above the door. She caught it awkwardly, surprised by the weight. "Today?" she asked. "Right now. Deer sign down by the creek. Fresh tracks." He opened the door. "You coming or staying?" Elara looked at the rifle in her hands. Heavy, deadly, real. She stood and followed him out into the cold morning light, leaving the warm cabin behind without looking back. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. The deer hunt took 4 days before Alara finally squeezed the trigger. 4 days of waking before dawn, moving through frozen forest in silence so complete her ears rang with it, learning to read tracks and scat and the subtle signs of animal passage that Kael pointed out with increasing impatience. "You're loud," he'd whisper when she stepped on a branch. "Deer can hear you from 100 yards. "I'm trying." "Try quieter." But on the 4th morning, when the buck stepped into the clearing and Kael tapped her shoulder, she was ready. The rifle felt lighter now, familiar in her hands. She found the sight picture he'd drilled into her, breathed out slowly, found the stillness between heartbeats. The shot cracked across the valley. The buck dropped. Alara lowered the rifle, her hands shaking. She'd just killed something large and alive and beautiful. The reality of it hit her like a fist to the chest. "Clean shot," Kael said, already moving forward. "Dropped where it stood. That's good. Means it didn't suffer." She followed on numb legs. The buck lay in the snow, steam rising from the entry wound. Its eyes were already glazing. "Now comes the hard part," Kael said, pulling out his knife. "Field dressing. We need to gut it here or the meat spoils before we get it back." He showed her how to make the first cuts, how to reach inside the still warm cavity and remove organs without puncturing intestines. His hands came out red and steaming in the cold air. "Your turn," he said, stepping back. "Get in there. Feel where everything connects." Alara knelt beside the deer. Up close, she could see individual hairs on its coat, the delicate structure of its ears. This had been a living thing an hour ago. "I can't." "Yeah, you can. We've been eating meat for a month. This is just seeing where it comes from." Kael's voice was firm. "You took its life. Now you honor that by not wasting it." She plunged her hands into the carcass. The warmth shocked her. The slickness. The wrongness of reaching inside something that had been breathing moments before. She gagged, fought not to vomit. "Keep going," Kael instructed. "Find the diaphragm. You'll feel it. Tough membrane between the chest and gut cavity." Her fingers found it. She cut where he told her to cut. Pulled when he said, "Pull." By the time they'd finished, her arms were red to the elbows, and she was shaking with something that might have been horror or triumph or both. They hauled the carcass back to the cabin on a sled Kael had built. It took 3 hours of hard pulling through melting snow. Alara's shoulders burned, her back screamed, but she didn't stop, didn't ask for a break. This was hers. She'd killed it. She'd field dress it. Now she'd carry it home. Home. When had she started thinking of the cabin that way? They spent the rest of the day butchering. Kael showed her how to break down the carcass, separate muscles, trim fat, save bones for broth. Nothing was wasted. Even the hide went into a salt cure for later tanning. "This animal will feed us for weeks," Kael said, wrapping portions in cloth. "Maybe a month if we're careful. That's the trade. One life for our survival." Alara looked at her blood-stained hands, at the meat they'd harvested, at the cost of her continued existence. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked. "No." Kael's answer was immediate. "But you get better at carrying it." That night they ate fresh venison steaks cooked over the fire. The meat was rich and gamey, better than anything Alara remembered from her old life. Maybe because she knew exactly what it had cost. Maybe because she'd earned it with her own hands. "You did good today," Kael said, soaking bread in meat juices. "I threw up twice after we gutted it." "Yeah, but you finished." He looked at her across the fire, and for the first time she saw something like respect in his eyes. Most people never could have pulled that trigger. Fewer still would have put their hands in afterward. "I didn't have a choice. You had a choice. You chose hard over easy." He stood, gathered the dishes. "That's what matters." Alara watched him move around the cabin with his usual efficiency. Somewhere in the last month, she'd stopped seeing him as her reluctant savior and started seeing him as something else. A teacher. A partner. Maybe even a friend, though Kael didn't seem like the type to use that word. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her now. Not the broken bride who'd stumbled into his trapline. Someone else. Someone newer. She hoped he saw someone worth teaching. The thaw continued. Snow retreated up the mountainside in daily increments, revealing muddy trails and swollen streams. The world turned from white to brown and gray, ugly in the way of early spring. Kael spent more time checking the perimeter, making repairs, reinforcing things Alara didn't understand the purpose of. "What are you preparing for?" she asked one afternoon, watching him replace a section of the split-rail fence that ran behind the cabin. "Anything." He hammered a post into softening ground. "Wildlife coming down from higher elevations. Hikers getting stupid ideas about shortcuts. The occasional desperate fool looking for shelter." "Has that happened before?" "Once or twice." His jaw tightened. "People think the mountain's empty, safe. They're wrong on both counts." Something in his tone made her uneasy. But before she could press, he was already moving to the next post, the conversation over. That night, she woke to the sound of dogs. Not dogs. Engines. Snowmobiles cutting through the darkness. Multiple machines moving fast. Kael was already up, pulling on boots. He grabbed the rifle from above the door. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Don't come out unless I call for you." "What's happening?" "Company." He chambered around. "The kind I don't want." He slipped out into the darkness before she could argue. Alara pressed herself against the wall beside the window, trying to see through the blackness. The engine sounds grew louder, then stopped. Voices carried on the night air, too far away to make out words, but the tone was clear, aggressive, demanding. Kael's voice, lower, firm, more arguing. Then a voice that made Alara's blood turn to ice. "I know she's here, you mountain hermit piece of shit. The tracks don't lie." "Damien." Her legs nearly gave out. "You're on private property," Kael said, loud enough now that she could hear clearly. "Turn around and leave." "Private property?" Damien laughed. That same cruel laugh from the cathedral. "You think you can hide her? The Whitlock princess? Her father's offering a reward. 20,000 for information leading to her safe recovery." "She's not here." "Then you won't mind if we look around?" "Yeah, I will mind. This is your last warning. Get off my land." "Or what? You'll shoot us?" "There's 5 of us and 1 of you, old man." The sound of multiple guns being cocked carried clearly in the cold air. Alara's mind raced. 5 men, all armed. Damien at the head of them, hunting her like she was some kind of escaped animal. She looked around the cabin, Kael's hunting knife on the table, the axe by the woodpile, the small revolver he kept in a drawer, the one he'd shown her how to load but told her never to touch. She touched it now. Her hands were steady as she checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. She'd never fired a handgun before, but the principle was the same as the rifle. Point, breathe, squeeze. The front door was still open from when Kael had left. She could see shapes in the darkness. 5 men spreading out, surrounding the cabin. Damien stood front and center, a rifle in his hands and a smile on his face. Alara stepped into the doorway. "That's far enough," she said. Her voice didn't shake. All 5 men spun toward her. Damien's smile widened. "There she is, the runaway bride." He took a step forward. "Alara, baby, your father's been worried sick. Time to stop this tantrum and come home." "I said that's far enough." She raised the revolver, two-handed grip like Kael had shown her. "Take another step and I'll drop you." Damien actually laughed. "You? Shoot me? Princess, you can't even—" The gunshot cut him off. The round hit the snow 2 feet in front of his boots, spraying ice and mud across his expensive winter gear. "Next one goes center mass," Alara said. "I've killed before. Deer, rabbits. One more thing bleeding out in the snow won't keep me up at night." The smile had left Damien's face. He looked at her, really looked, and she could see the moment he realized she wasn't the same woman who'd fled his humiliation. "Alara, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" The word came out sharp as broken glass. "You humiliated me in front of 300 people, called me worthless, unwanted, an ornament." She took a step forward, gun steady. "You know what I learned up here? You were half right. I was worthless, weak, useless. But that person died in the snow. So what? You're a mountain woman now?" Damien's sneer was back, but it looked forced. "Playing house with this hermit? Living in squalor? I'm someone who can survive without servants and credit cards and other people solving my problems." Another step. "I feed myself, shelter myself, defend myself. Can you say the same?" Kael had moved during her speech, circling around to get a better angle. Now he had a clear shot at 3 of Damien's men. The men had noticed, were getting nervous. "We outnumber you," Damien tried again. Yeah, you do. Alara's finger rested on the trigger. Question is whether you're willing to find out who drops first. You? One of your hired guns? How many of you make it off this mountain if you push this? One of the men, younger, barely out of his teens, lowered his rifle. Man, this isn't worth 20 grand. Shut up, Damien snapped. Seriously, she's pointing a gun at us. This is psycho. I said shut up. Cale's voice cut through the argument. You've got about 10 seconds to make a choice. Walk away now. You all go home breathing. Stay, and we start dropping bodies. I've got no problem digging graves when the ground thaws. He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that there was no doubt he meant every word. Damien's face twisted with rage. You're making a mistake, Alara. Your father's company is gone, bankrupt. Your family's name is ruined. You have nothing without me. I have this mountain, this cabin, my own two hands. She smiled, and it felt sharp, dangerous. Turns out that's everything I need. You'll regret this. Probably, but I'll regret it on my own terms, not yours. For a long moment, no one moved. 5 guns against 2. The night wind carrying the scent of pine and melting snow. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Then Damien lowered his rifle. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. Alara's gun didn't waver. You just don't know it yet. He gestured to his men. They backed toward their snowmobiles slowly, not turning their backs. Smart. Cale tracked them with his rifle the whole way. The engines roared to life. The machines turned and headed back down the mountain, red taillights disappearing into the darkness. Only when the sounds had faded completely did Alara lower the gun. Her hand started shaking then, the adrenaline catching up with her. She'd just pointed a weapon at 5 men, fired a shot, threatened to kill. The old Alara would have collapsed, would have cried, would have needed comfort and reassurance. Instead, she ejected the spent shell, pocketed it out of habit. Cale had drilled into her that you always police your brass, and walked back into the cabin. Cale followed a moment later, still carrying the rifle. That was stupid, he said. Probably. Could have gotten us both killed. Maybe. He set the rifle down, looked at her. Really looked at her. Where the hell did that come from? I don't know. Alara set the revolver on the table with careful precision. I heard his voice and something just switched. All that fear, all that shame he made me feel, it was just gone. I wasn't that person anymore. No, Cale agreed. You're not. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle she'd never seen him touch before, handed her one. To not being who we were, he said. They drank. The whiskey burned, but it was a good burn, clean. They'll come back, Alara said. Probably. Men like that don't like losing face. Cale settled into his chair. But they'll think twice now. Maybe bring more guns. Maybe try a different approach. What do? We prepare. Set more traps. Real ones. Not the kind for rabbits. He looked at the darkness beyond the window. Turn this mountain into something uninviting. That's not much of a plan. You got a better one? Alara thought about it. About Damien's words. About her father's bankruptcy. About the life she'd left behind, now completely burned to ashes. We could leave, she said quietly. Go somewhere they won't find us. Could, Cale sipped his whiskey. Or we could stay. Make a stand. Show them you're done running. I did run, all the way up a mountain in a wedding dress. That wasn't running, that was escaping. He met her eyes. There's a difference. Outside, the wind picked up, the kind of wind that came before another storm. Alara could smell snow in the air. How long do we have? She asked. Before they come back? Week. Maybe 2 if they need to regroup and plan. Cale finished his drink. Before the next blizzard? 12 hours. Maybe less. Then we better get started. They spent the night preparing. Cale showed her where he kept his cache of supplies. Ammunition, preserved food, medical gear, enough to withstand a siege if necessary. They moved weapons to strategic locations around the cabin, loaded every gun they had. You ever think about why you live like this? Alara asked as they worked. Always prepared for the worst? Because the worst happens. His voice was flat. You can hope it won't. Pray it won't. But preparation beats prayer every time. What happened to you? Before. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I was military, special operations, did 3 tours in places that don't officially exist, doing things the government pretends we didn't do. He checked the action on a shotgun. Lost good people, saw worse things. Came home and realized I couldn't go back to normal. Couldn't pretend I was the same person who'd left. So you came here. So I came here. He loaded shells with mechanical precision. Built this life, these walls, these defenses. Told myself I was done fighting. Are you? He looked at her. Apparently not. They worked until dawn broke gray and heavy with coming snow. Then they slept in shifts, Kyle taking first watch while Ilara crashed hard into exhaustion. She dreamed of the cathedral, of white roses falling, of Damien's laugh echoing off stone walls. But this time in the dream, she didn't run. She stood her ground, raised a gun, and fired. She woke to Kyle shaking her shoulder. Company, he said quietly. Different kind this time. Ilara rolled out of bed, grabbed the rifle that now lived beside her. How many? Just one. Old man in a Mercedes SUV, expensive coat. Looks lost. Her stomach dropped. My father. She moved to the window. Sure enough, her father's vehicle was parked at the edge of the cleared area, looking absurdly out of place against the rough mountain landscape. Richard Whitlock stood beside it in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Kyle's entire cabin, his breath fogging in the cold air. He looked smaller than she remembered. Older. Diminished. You want me to send him away? Kyle asked. Ilara watched her father scan the tree line, searching for some sign of her. His face was haggard, unshaven, not the polished businessman she'd known all her life. No, she said. I'll talk to him. You sure? I need to. She set down the rifle. This is mine to handle. She walked out into the cold morning air in borrowed clothes and work boots, her hair pulled back in a practical braid, her hands rough with calluses. Her father saw her and his face crumpled. Ilara, he breathed. Thank heaven. I thought, when Damien said, he started toward her. She held up a hand. Stop there. He froze. Sweetheart, I'm not here to force you back. I just needed to see that you were alive. I'm alive. You've seen. You can go. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? Her voice came out harder than she intended. How you sold me to save your company? How you knew exactly what Damien was and didn't care because you needed his family's money? How you stood there at that altar and watched him destroy me and didn't say a single word? Richard flinched like she'd struck him. I know I failed you. Failed your mother. Failed everything. His voice broke. The company's gone. Bankruptcy court took it all. Our house, the cars, everything. Your mother left me. I'm staying in a motel and living off credit cards I can barely pay. And you came here for what? Sympathy? Forgiveness? I came because you're my daughter, and I needed to know you were safe. He looked at the cabin, at Kyle standing in the doorway with a rifle. I don't understand what you're doing here, living like this, with him. This isn't you, Ilara. You're right, she said. It's not the me you made, the ornament, the pretty thing to trade for business deals. That person's dead. So what are you now? Good question. What was she? Not the society princess, not the runaway bride, something between who she'd been and who she was becoming. I'm someone learning to survive, she finally said. Learning to be worth something beyond my last name and my father's money. By hiding on a mountain? By facing the hardest things I've ever faced. She gestured at the wilderness around them. Out here, nothing's given. Everything's earned. Food, warmth, safety. My own respect. You can't buy any of it. Can't charm your way through. You do the work or you die. Richard looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. This isn't a life, Ilara. It's just roughing it, plain pretend. What happens when winter really hits, when this novelty wears off? Then I'll still be here, doing the work, getting stronger. She crossed her arms. What happens to you when your credit cards max out? When the motel kicks you out? When you run out of people to borrow from? The question hit home. She could see it in his face. I thought I was protecting you, he said quietly. The marriage, the arrangement. I thought I was securing your future. You were securing yours, don't pretend otherwise. Maybe. He looked old, defeated. I came to ask you to come home. Help me rebuild. We could start over, both of us, smaller, humbler, but together. There it was, the pull of family, of obligation, of the life she'd known, however broken. No, Alara said. Alara, no. Firmer this time. I'm not your life raft. I'm not responsible for fixing what you broke. You made choices. You lived with comfort and lies and easy money. Now you get to live with the consequences. So you'd abandon your own father? You abandoned me first, at that altar, when it mattered. She felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. I begged you not to make me marry him. You said it was for the best, for the family, for the business. Everything except for me. Richard's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix anything. She stepped back toward the cabin. Go home, Dad. Build your new life. I'm building mine. Will I ever see you again? Alara thought about it. About the man who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd read her bedtime stories, who'd walked her down that aisle toward humiliation and ruin. Maybe, she said, when I know who I am without you, when I'm strong enough that seeing you won't break me. But not now. Not yet. He nodded slowly, pulled out a business card, a motel's card with a room number scrawled on the back. If you change your mind, if you need anything. She didn't take it. He set it on the hood of his car instead. I'm proud of you, he said suddenly. I know I have no right to be, but seeing you like this, strong, certain, unafraid, it's who you were always supposed to become. I'm just sorry it took losing everything for you to find it. Then he got in his Mercedes and drove away, the expensive vehicle disappearing down the mountain road. Alara stood in the cold until Kael came up beside her. You okay? He asked. I don't know. She watched the empty road. I thought it would feel better, telling him off, standing my ground. It doesn't feel like anything at first. The feeling comes later. He handed her a cup of coffee. You did the right thing. How do you know? Because you chose yourself. That's always right, even when it hurts. They stood together in the quiet morning, drinking coffee and watching the clouds roll in. The snow started falling an hour later, big fat flakes that meant business. By noon, the world had turned white again, erasing Richard's tire tracks like they'd never existed. Kael and Alara worked through the storm, setting the traps he'd mentioned, not for animals, for men. Tripwires that would trigger alarms, false trails that led to dead ends or dangerous drop-offs. Pressure plates that would collapse paths under weight. This is excessive, Alara said as they finished the third perimeter trap. This is survival. Kael checked the tension on a wire. Damien's type doesn't give up. He'll be back. Probably better prepared. Maybe with real professionals instead of weekend warriors. So we turn the mountain into a war zone? We turn it into ours. He stood, brushed snow from his coat. Every animal defends its territory. We're just better armed than most. They worked until dark, then retreated to the cabin, fed the fire, ate venison stew, cleaned weapons in companionable silence. Kael? Alara said as they settled in for the night. Yeah? Thank you. For letting me stay. For teaching me. For backing me up tonight. He looked at her across the fire. You earned your place here. Didn't let you stay? You made yourself stay. Still, you could have sent me away after the first week. Could have. He went back to cleaning his rifle. But then who'd mess up my traps and scare off game with loud footsteps? She smiled. I'm quieter now. Yeah, you are. He set down the rifle. You're a lot of things now that you weren't 6 weeks ago. Is that good? It's real. That's better than good. That night, Alara lay in her bedroll and thought about everything that had changed. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a bride, a daughter, a name without substance. Now she was someone who could hunt and fight and stand her ground against men with guns. The transformation should have felt complete, but she knew better now. Transformation wasn't an event. It was a process, endless and ongoing. She fell asleep to the sound of snow against the roof and woke to the sound of Kael loading weapons. They're here, he said quietly. 8 men this time, moving up the south ridge. Alara was on her feet in seconds, pulling on boots and grabbing her rifle. Damien? Haven't seen him yet. But these aren't amateurs. Kale's face was grim. Professional gear, military movement patterns, someone paid real money for this. What's the plan? We make them regret every step they take on this mountain. He handed her a radio. Channel 3. You take the east side. I'll take west. We funnel them into the kill zone we set up yesterday. Kill zone. The words should have scared her. Instead, Alara checked her rifle and headed for the door. The mountain was theirs. Time to defend it. The pre-dawn darkness made everything harder. Alara moved through the trees on the eastern approach, her breath controlled, her footsteps careful on ground she'd memorized over the past weeks. The rifle was an extension of her arms now, no longer the awkward foreign object it had been that first hunting trip. The radio crackled once, Kael's signal. They were in position. She settled behind a fallen log she'd scouted 2 days ago, good cover with clear sightlines down the slope. Through the gray light, she could make out movement. 8 shapes moving up the mountain in a tactical spread. Professional, like Kael had said. They moved like they'd done this before. One of them tripped the first alarm wire. The bells Kael had strung in the trees jangled, a sound that might have been wind chimes or mountain decorations if you didn't know better. But it told Alara exactly where they were. The men stopped. Hand signals. They'd heard it too. Contact, one of them said, voice carrying in the cold air. Eyes up. They know we're here. Alara's finger found the trigger guard. Not yet. Let them come closer. Let them walk into the terrain that would trap them. They advanced more carefully now. Weapons raised, covering each other's movement. 2 of them split off, trying to flank. Right into Kael's position. The crack of his rifle echoed across the valley. One of the flanking men went down hard, screaming, clutching his leg. Not a kill shot, deliberate. Contact left, someone shouted. Shoot her in the rocks. They scattered for cover, returning fire toward where Kael had been. But he was already moving. Alara could track his progress by the way they kept shooting at empty positions. The radio crackled. Eastern approach. 3 coming your way. Let them pass the marker stone. Alara spotted the marker. A gray boulder with a white blaze she'd painted herself. The 3 men were moving fast now, using the chaos from Kael's attack to push through. She waited. Breathing, counting steps. They passed the marker. She fired. The lead man's knee exploded. He went down shrieking. The other 2 dove for cover, weapons searching for her position. But she was already moving, using the technique Kael had drilled into her. Shoot and move. Never stay where you fired from. Bitch shot Jenkins, one of them yelled. Where is she? I don't... Alara's second shot took him in the shoulder. The impact spun him around, sent his rifle tumbling into the snow. The 3rd man ran, just turned and bolted back down the mountain, leaving his wounded companions behind. 7 left. 6, if you counted the man Kael had dropped. The radio. Nice shooting. Pull back to position 2. They're regrouping.
Alara moved through the trees, using the routes they'd planned. Behind her, she could hear the wounded men calling for help. One of them was crying. The sound made her stomach twist, but she pushed it down. They'd come to her mountain. They'd brought weapons. They'd made their choice. Position 2 was a narrow defile between 2 rock faces. Natural funnel. Kael had spent an entire day rigging it with surprises. She reached it just as Kael appeared from the other side, breathing hard but moving well. 6 mobile targets, he said, checking his rifle. They're pulling back, probably calling for evac on the wounded. Should we let them? He looked at her. You want to? Alara thought about it. About mercy versus strategy. About the fact that these men would just regroup and come back with more force. No, she said. We end this now. Kael's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. You're learning. The radio on Kael's belt crackled. A different frequency. Someone was transmitting in the open. Need immediate evac. We've got 3 down. Repeat, 3 down. They're armed and fortified. A new voice responded. Familiar. 3 down from 2 targets? What the hell are you doing up there? Damien. Sir, these aren't civilians. They're trained. One of them's dropping shots at 400 yards in this terrain. I don't care if they're special forces. You were paid to bring her down, so bring her down. With respect, sir, this isn't what we signed up for. Then consider your contract terminated. The radio went dead. Kael and Alara exchanged looks. He's not extracting them, she said. Nope, he's cutting them loose. Kale moved to the edge of the defile, scanning the slope below. Which means they're going to get desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Or they get mean. That too.
The attack came faster than expected. The remaining 6 men pushed hard, laying down suppressing fire as they advanced. They'd abandoned tactics for aggression, and it almost worked. Almost. Kyle triggered the first trap, a rope system that released a deadfall of logs down the slope. 2 men went down under the tumbling wood, bones breaking with sounds like green branches snapping. 4 left. They kept coming. Elara fired from cover, methodical shots that forced them to ground. She wasn't trying to kill. Kyle had taught her that wounding was often more effective than killing. A dead man was left behind. A wounded man required resources, attention, care. One of her shots caught a man in the hip. He went down screaming. 3 left. The radio crackled again. Different voice this time. Older, tired. Whoever you are, we're done. We're extracting our people and leaving. No more shooting. We just want to get our guys out. Kale picked up the radio. You've got 10 minutes. After that, anyone still on this mountain is a target. Understood. Thank you. They watched through the scope as the 3 remaining men gathered their wounded. It was ugly work, brutal. Broken bones and bullet wounds and the long, dangerous process of moving casualties down a mountain in snow. We should help them, Elara heard herself say. Kyle looked at her like she'd grown a second head. They came here to drag you back by force. I know, but... She watched a man struggle to lift his wounded friend. They're beaten. And we won. Mercy gets you killed. Maybe, but I'm not executing wounded men who are retreating. She stood, rifle pointed at the ground. That's not who I want to be. Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, grabbed a medical kit from his pack. You're going to get us both killed one day. They approached carefully, weapons ready, but not aimed. The mercenaries, because that's what they clearly were, tensed when they saw them coming. Easy, Kyle called out. We're here to help. Once. Then you leave, and you don't come back. The older man, their leader probably, nodded slowly. Deal. They worked in tense silence. Kyle's military training showed as he assessed wounds, packed bullet holes, splinted broken bones. Elara assisted, holding pressure on wounds, helping stabilize fractures. You did this? The leader asked, gesturing at his team's injuries. Yeah, Elara said. Just you 2? Just us 2. He shook his head. Damien said you were a spoiled rich girl, said it'd be easy money. Damien says a lot of things. Most of them are lies. She tied off a bandage. This one's got a collapsed lung. You need to get him to a hospital soon or he'll die. We've got a chopper waiting at the base. Can you help us get them down? Kyle and Elara exchanged looks. Finally, Kyle nodded. They helped carry the wounded down to the staging area, a flat section of trail where a helicopter could land. It took 3 hours of hard work, and by the end, everyone was exhausted. The helicopter came in low, rotors whipping snow into clouds. The mercenaries loaded their casualties, worked with grim efficiency born of practice. Before boarding, the leader turned back. For what it's worth, he said, you were right to shoot. We knew what we were getting into. And now? Elara asked. Now we tell everyone we know that this mountain is off limits, that there's a crazy woman and her partner up here who'll drop you before you see them coming. He almost smiled. Best advertising you could ask for. The helicopter lifted off, banking south toward civilization. Kyle and Elara stood in the rotor wash, watching it disappear. That was stupid, Kale said. Probably. Could have killed us while we were helping. They didn't. They could have, but they didn't. She looked at him. You would have done the same thing. The hell I would. Liar. You're the one who grabbed the medical kit. He grunted, started walking back toward the cabin. But she could see the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth. They spent the rest of the day cleaning up, checking the traps, repairing damage from the firefight. The mountain had defended them, but it had paid a price. Trees splintered by bullets, disturbed earth where the deadfall had triggered, blood in the snow that would take weeks to wash away. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bedroll, staring at the ceiling, replaying every shot, every decision, the sound of men screaming, the weight of the rifle, the choice to help instead of finish them. "You did good today," Kyle said from his chair. She hadn't realized he was still awake. "I shot 3 people." "Yeah. I don't feel guilty about it." "Should you?" Elara thought about it. "I don't know. They came to hurt us, to drag me back to a life I don't want. But they're still people, still someone's son or brother or father. And you're someone's daughter, someone's—" He paused. "Someone worth defending." She looked over at him. "Is that what we're doing? Defending each other? What else would you call it?" "Good question. Partnership implied equality. Friendship implied something softer. What they had was forged in blood and snow and the shared understanding that survival sometimes required violence." "I don't know," she admitted, "but whatever it is, I'm grateful for it." Kyle was quiet. Then, "Me too." She fell asleep to that, the knowledge that she wasn't alone, that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The next attack didn't come for 2 weeks, long enough that they started to relax, to believe maybe the message had gotten through. Then Richard Whitlock showed up again. Elara saw the Mercedes coming up the trail and felt her stomach sink. She'd thought that conversation was finished, that he'd understood. But when he got out of the car, he wasn't alone. A woman followed, professional clothes, briefcase, the look of someone who worked in law or finance. "Elara," Richard called, "please, just hear us out." Kyle appeared beside her, rifle in hand but pointed down. "Want me to send them away?" "No. Let's see what fresh hell this is." They approached carefully. The woman looked nervous, eyeing the cabin and the surrounding forest like she expected an ambush. "This is Margaret Chen," Richard said. "She's a bankruptcy attorney. She has information I think you need to hear." Elara crossed her arms. "I'm not interested in your business problems. It's not about the business. It's about Damien." Margaret stepped forward, opened her briefcase. "May I?" "Talk fast." Margaret pulled out a folder. "Damien Crow's family is being investigated for fraud, securities violations, tax evasion, illegal offshore accounts. The pharmaceutical company was a shell game. The entire fortune was built on paper transactions and investor money. And this matters to me why? Because the marriage contract you almost entered included clauses that would have made you legally liable for his family's debts. If you'd gone through with it, you'd be facing federal charges right now alongside them." The words hit like a physical blow. Elara reached for the folder, read through the documents with growing horror. Counts of fraud, RICO violations, a criminal conspiracy that spanned decades. "He knew," she said quietly. Damien knew the walls were closing in. He needed the marriage for legitimacy, Margaret finished, and to shuffle assets into your name before the seizure. You would have been arrested on your honeymoon. Elara's hands shook. She thought the humiliation at the altar was the worst thing Damien could do to her. But this was calculated destruction. He'd been willing to destroy her life to save his own. "There's more," Richard said quietly. "The men he sent after you, they weren't just trying to bring you back. They were trying to force you to sign documents, transfer agreements, things that would have implicated you in the fraud." "How do you know this?" "Because the FBI came to me, asked questions about the wedding, about Damien's interest in our shipping routes." Richard looked old, broken. "I gave them everything. Bank records, emails, meeting notes. His voice cracked. "I almost sold you to a criminal, Elara. Almost ruined you completely." Elara looked at the documents, at her father's devastated face, at Margaret Chen's professional concern. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because Damien's desperate. The FBI is building their case, but it takes time. He knows you're the loose end. If he can get you to sign anything, say anything, he can muddy the waters, create reasonable doubt." Margaret's expression was grave. "You're in danger, real danger. Not from hired men with guns, but from legal machinations that could swallow you whole." "So, what do I do?" "You need to give a deposition, go on record about what he did, about the wedding, about his attempts to force you back." Margaret pulled out more papers. "I can represent you, pro bono. Your father asked me to." Elara looked at Richard. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I failed you once. I won't do it again." His eyes were wet. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know I don't deserve your trust. But please, let me help you this one time." Kael had been silent through all of this, but now he spoke. What's the catch? Margaret looked at him. The catch is that Alara will have to leave the mountain, come to the city, spend days, maybe weeks, in depositions and meetings. She'll be exposed, visible, vulnerable. No, Kyle said immediately. Too dangerous. I know it's... No, find another way. But Alara was thinking about Damien's face when she'd pointed a gun at him, about his desperate attempts to reclaim control, about the fact that he was still out there, still dangerous, still capable of reaching her even up here. What happens if I don't testify? She asked. The case goes forward without you, but your silence can be used against you. Damien's lawyers will argue that your refusal to cooperate proves you're complicit, that you're hiding something. And if I do testify, then you take away his power. You control the narrative. You show the world exactly who he is. Margaret's voice was firm. You win completely. Alara looked at the mountain, at the cabin she'd come to think of as home, at Kyle, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. How long? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if the defense drags it out. 2 weeks in the city, in her old world, facing her old demons. The thought made her sick, but the alternative was letting Damien win, letting him keep the power to hurt her. I'll do it, she said. Alara, Kale started. I'll do it, she repeated, looking at him. But on my terms. I want security, real security, not just lawyers in suits, and I want you with me. Kale blinked. What? You taught me to survive out here, taught me to fight. Now teach me to survive down there. She gestured toward the city. I can't do this alone. I don't do cities. I don't do people. I know, but I'm asking anyway. She held his gaze. Please. The word hung in the cold air between them. Please. She'd never asked him for anything before, just taken what he offered and worked for the rest. Kale looked at the forest, at the cabin, at 20 years of isolation he'd built like armor. 2 weeks, he finally said. Then we come back. Deal. Richard looked between them, clearly trying to understand their dynamic and failing. I can arrange accommodations, a secure location, no hotels, no public places. Kale's voice was hard. I know a place. Safe house from my old life. Off the grid, but close enough to downtown. We use that or we don't go. Margaret nodded. That's acceptable. When can you leave? Alara looked at Kyle. At the mountain. At the life they'd built in blood and snow and small daily victories. Tomorrow, she said. We leave tomorrow. That night, they packed in silence. Alara's belongings fit in a single bag. Clothes Kyle had given her, the knife he'd taught her to use, the badly carved spoon from her first attempt at whittling. Everything she owned could be carried on her back. You don't have to do this, Kale said as he loaded weapons into a locked case. We could disappear, deeper into the mountains, somewhere they'd never find us. Running isn't the same as escaping. You taught me that. She folded a shirt, added it to the bag. Besides, I'm tired of being afraid of him, tired of him having any power over my life. The city will try to swallow you, remind you of who you were. Then I'll remind it of who I am now. She closed the bag. I can survive a blizzard, Kyle. I can hunt and trap and shoot. I can field dress a deer and split wood and defend my home. A few lawyers and depositions? That's nothing. He almost smiled. You've gotten cocky. I've gotten confident. There's a difference. They secured the cabin, setting traps and alarms that would alert them if anyone approached while they were gone. Kyle moved through each task with military precision, but Alara could see the tension in his shoulders. You're worried, she said. I'm always worried. Keeps me alive. No, this is different. What is it? He was quiet for a long moment, checking and rechecking a window latch. Finally, I haven't been back. To the city. To people. Not in 20 years. Why? Because the last time I was there, I did things. Bad things. Necessary things, maybe, but bad. And the man who did those things, he stopped. I don't know if I can trust him around civilians. Alara understood. She'd seen flashes of that man, the soldier, the operator, whatever he'd been before, in the way he moved during the attack, the cold efficiency of his violence, the absolute certainty of his actions. I trust you, she said. You shouldn't. Well, I do anyway. She touched his arm, made him look at her. You're not who you were either. Neither of us is. We're who we made ourselves into, remember? He covered her hand with his, rough calluses and old scars and surprising warmth. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks. Then we come home. Home. The word felt right. The mountain, the cabin, the life they'd built. It was home in a way the mansion had never been. They left at dawn, hiking down the trail in comfortable silence. The forest was waking around them. Birds calling, small animals moving through underbrush. The world continuing its ancient rhythms regardless of human drama. At the trailhead, Richard was waiting with the Mercedes. Margaret sat in the passenger seat, reviewing documents on a tablet. Ready? Richard asked as they approached. Alara looked back up the mountain. Somewhere up there was the cabin. The traps. The life she'd fought to build. It would be waiting when she returned. If she returned. No. When. When she returned. Ready? She said, and got in the car. The drive down felt surreal. Pavement replaced dirt trails. Buildings appeared, then multiplied. Traffic. Noise. People everywhere, none of them aware of the woman in the back seat who'd spent the last 2 months learning to skin rabbits and survive blizzards. Cale sat rigid beside her, jaw clenched, eyes tracking every vehicle, every pedestrian, every potential threat. His hand rested near the concealed weapon Margaret had secured permits for. Legal, but barely. You okay? Alara asked quietly. No. He didn't look at her. Too many people, too many variables. I can't secure this. You don't have to secure everything. Just stay with me. His hand found hers, squeezed once. Yeah, I can do that. The safe house was in an older neighborhood, the kind that had seen better days but still had good bones. 3-story brownstone, bars on the lower windows, multiple exits. Kyle did a full sweep before allowing anyone else inside. It'll do, he finally said. They spent that first day preparing. Margaret walked Alara through what to expect. The questions, the lawyers, the process. Richard stayed out of the way, making calls, arranging logistics, trying to be useful without being intrusive. Kyle disappeared for several hours and came back with weapons, surveillance equipment, and supplies that made Margaret nervous. Is all that necessary? She asked, eyeing the arsenal. Yes, Kyle said flatly, and continued setting up motion sensors. That night, Alara couldn't sleep in the unfamiliar bed. Too soft. Too quiet. She missed the sound of wind through pines, the crackle of the wood stove, the weight of rough blankets. She found Kyle in the kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the street through a gap in the curtains. Can't sleep either? She asked. Don't need much sleep. Old habit. She poured herself coffee, joined him at the window. The city glowed beyond the glass, lights and movement and millions of lives intersecting. I used to love this, she said quietly. The city, the lights, the feeling of being at the center of everything. And now? Now it feels fake. All these people pretending, performing, playing roles. She sipped the coffee. On the mountain, everything was real. This is just theater, Cale finished. Yeah. They stood together in the darkness, 2 people who no longer fit in the world they'd come from, preparing to face it anyway. Tomorrow it starts, Alara said. Tomorrow you show them who you really are. And who's that? Kyle looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Someone who survived, he said. Someone who fought back. Someone who chose the mountain over comfort and became stronger for it. He set down his coffee. You're not the woman who ran up that trail in a wedding dress. You're the woman who came down with a rifle and no fear left. Don't let them make you forget that. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For making me see myself. He touched her face, gentle despite his rough hands. You did that yourself. I just pointed you at the work. She leaned into his touch, and for a moment they stood there, 2 damaged people who'd found something like peace in the wilderness and were about to risk it for justice. The deposition started at 9 the next morning. The conference room was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, mahogany paneling, a table that could seat 30 people. Damien's legal team occupied one side. 5 lawyers in suits that cost more than most cars, each one radiating the kind of confidence that came from never losing. Alara sat across from them in jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair pulled back in the same practical braid she wore on the mountain. She looked out of place and she knew it. That was the point. Let them underestimate her. Damien's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Carlson, opened a leather portfolio with deliberate precision. "Miss Whitlock, thank you for agreeing to speak with us today." "I didn't agree to anything. I was subpoenaed." His smile was thin. "Of course. Let's begin with the events of November 14th, your wedding day." Alara met his eyes. "You mean the day your client publicly humiliated me in front of 300 witnesses? I mean the day you abandoned a legal ceremony and fled into a wilderness area, causing significant concern and expense for your family and friends." "Fled?" Alara tasted the word. "Interesting choice. Like I was running from justice instead of running from a man who was using me as a shield for his family's criminal enterprise." Carlson's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "That's quite an accusation." "It's quite a fact. Your client knew the FBI was investigating his family, knew the walls were closing in. The marriage wasn't about love or even business. It was about creating legal cover for fraud." "Do you have evidence of this?" "I have his words, his actions, his repeated attempts to force me back, to make me sign documents, to implicate me in schemes I knew nothing about." She leaned forward. "And I have the fact that he's sitting in this building right now instead of in federal custody only because his family can afford lawyers like you." Margaret touched her arm gently, a reminder to stay calm. But Alara was calm, calmer than she'd been in months. This wasn't a blizzard or a firefight. This was just words, and words couldn't hurt her anymore. Carlson tried a different approach. "Miss Whitlock, isn't it true that you're currently living in an isolated location with a man who has no legal relationship to you? A man with a documented history of violence?" Cale, sitting in the corner of the room, didn't move, but Alara felt the temperature drop. "I'm living with someone who saved my life, who taught me to survive, who treats me like an equal instead of property." She smiled. "Unlike your client, who treated me like a business asset he could write off when I stopped being useful. And this man, Kyle Varden, he was present when you fired weapons at hired security personnel? Hired mercenaries who came to my home with guns, yes. We defended ourselves, successfully, I might add." "You admit to shooting multiple people?" "I admit to defending my life and my home against armed intruders." Alara's voice was steady. "What would you have done, Mr. Carlson? Let them drag me back? Sign whatever documents they shoved in front of me? Smile and cooperate with my own destruction?" "I would have called the police. There are no police on the mountain. There's just survival." She leaned back. "But you wouldn't understand that. You've probably never had to fight for anything real in your life." Margaret cleared her throat. "My client has answered your questions regarding the wedding and subsequent events. Unless you have specific questions about Mr. Crow's alleged criminal activities, I think we're done here." Carlson's jaw tightened. "One more question. Miss Whitlock, if you're so certain of Mr. Crow's guilt, why didn't you report your suspicions earlier?" "Because I didn't know. He lied to me, used me, and then discarded me when I stopped being useful. Sound familiar? It's the same thing his family's been doing to investors for decades." Alara stood. "The difference is, I fought back. I survived. And now I'm making sure everyone knows exactly who he is." She walked out before Carlson could respond. Margaret followed, gathering papers with barely concealed satisfaction. In the hallway, Cale fell into step beside her. "You did good in there. I wanted to punch him." "I know, but you didn't. That's growth." Despite everything, Alara laughed. The sound echoed off marble floors and made several lawyers turn to stare. The depositions continued for 6 more days, each session more aggressive than the last. Damien's team tried every angle, questioning her mental state, her relationship with KL, her motivations for testifying. They painted her as unstable, vindictive, a woman scorned who was making false accusations for revenge. Alara met every attack with calm precision. Yes, she'd left her wedding. Yes, she'd nearly died in the mountains. Yes, she'd changed. But none of that made her a liar. On the 7th day, something shifted. Damien himself showed up to the deposition. The first time Alara had seen him since the confrontation on the mountain. He looked diminished somehow. Still handsome, still expensively dressed, but there was a desperate edge to him now. Their eyes met across the conference room. He looked away first. Carlson seemed surprised by his client's presence. "Mr. Crow, I'm not sure it's advisable. I want to talk to her," Damien said. "Alone." "Absolutely not," Margaret said immediately. But Alara held up a hand. "It's fine." "Alara, it's fine," she repeated, looking at Kael. He read the question in her eyes, nodded once. He'd be right outside. The room cleared, just Alara and Damien, separated by 15 feet of polished wood. "You look different," Damien said finally. "I am different. I heard about what happened. On the mountain. The men I sent." He rubbed his face. I shouldn't have done that." "No, you shouldn't have." "I was desperate. The investigation was closing in, and I thought if I could just get you to sign—" He stopped. "It doesn't matter now. Everything's falling apart anyway." Alara watched him, saw the cracks in his facade, the fear beneath the arrogance. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "At the wedding, why make it public like that?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. "Because I could. Because I was angry at my father for forcing the marriage, angry at your father for being weak, angry at you for being so naive." He met her eyes. "I wanted to hurt someone. You were the easiest target." The honesty was almost shocking. "And now?" Alara asked. "Now I'm the one being destroyed in front of everyone. Funny how that works." He stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. "My father's in federal custody. My mother's in rehab. The company's being liquidated. Our assets frozen. Everything gone." He turned back to her. "You won. Congratulations. This isn't about winning, isn't it? You get justice. I get prison. Sounds like winning to me." Alara thought about that. About justice versus revenge. About what she actually wanted from all this. "I don't want you to suffer," she said slowly. "I just want you to stop being able to hurt people. There's a difference. Feels the same from where I'm standing. Maybe, but that's not my problem anymore." She stood. "I'm testifying tomorrow. Full deposition for the federal prosecutors. I'm going to tell them everything about the wedding, the marriage contract, the attempted kidnapping, all of it. I know. And when it's done, I'm going back to the mountain, back to the life I built, and you'll never be part of it again." Damien nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For what I did to you, for using you, for all of it." "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix anything." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." Alara walked to the door, then paused. "Damien? That person you humiliated at the altar? The one you called worthless and boring and weak? She would have believed you, would have carried that shame for the rest of her life." She looked back at him. "But she doesn't exist anymore. I killed her the same day you tried to kill my spirit. So thanks, I guess, for pushing me hard enough that I had no choice but to become someone stronger." She left him standing there, silhouetted against the window, a man watching his entire world collapse. The federal deposition took 2 full days. Alara answered every question with clear, detailed precision. Dates, conversations, documents she'd seen, suspicions she'd had but ignored, the pattern of Damien's behavior leading up to the wedding. The prosecutors were thorough but not unkind. They understood what she'd been through. On the second day, they showed her documents, email chains, financial transfers, meeting notes from Damien's family discussing her explicitly as a legal shield and liability buffer. Seeing it in writing made something inside her go cold and hard. They'd never seen her as a person, just a tool, a means to an end. "Miss Whitlock, I know this is difficult," the lead prosecutor said, "but your testimony is crucial. With your statement and these documents, we can build a case that puts the Crow family away for decades." "Good," Alara said. "Do it." When it was finally over, Margaret drove her back to the safe house in silence. Alara watched the city pass outside the window. All those people living their lives, unaware of the small dramas playing out in conference rooms and federal buildings. "You did a brave thing," Margaret said as they pulled up to the brownstone. "I did a necessary thing. There's a difference." "Is there?" Alara thought about that. "Maybe not. Maybe they're the same sometimes." Inside, Kael was packing. Their 2 weeks were almost up. Another day, and they could leave. "How'd it go?" he asked, folding clothes with military precision. "It's done. The prosecutors have everything they need."
And Damien's family is going down. Federal charges, prison time, complete dismantling of everything they built. Kale watched her face. You don't look happy about it. I'm not unhappy, I'm just... She sat on the couch, suddenly exhausted. I'm tired, Kale. Tired of thinking about them. Tired of this city. Tired of performing for lawyers and prosecutors and everyone else who wants a piece of the story. He sat beside her. One more day. Then we go home. Home. The word made her chest ache with longing, but that night, Richard showed up at the safe house. He looked worse than the last time she'd seen him. Thinner, older. There were bruises under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. I'm leaving, he said without preamble. The city, the country. There's nothing left for me here. Alara felt something twist in her chest. Where will you go? Well, Europe maybe, Asia. Somewhere I can start over without the Whitlock name following me. He pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Insurance money from the company liquidation. Not much, but it's legally yours. And a letter. Don't read it now. Read it later when you're ready. She took the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy. I won't ask you to forgive me, Richard continued. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know that seeing who you've become, strong, independent, unafraid, it's the only thing I'm proud of in the last 30 years. Dad, let me finish. His voice cracked. I failed you as a father, put business before family, money before love. I taught you all the wrong lessons, and when it mattered most, I chose wrong. He wiped his eyes. But you chose right. You chose yourself. And that's everything I should have taught you, but didn't. Alara stood, crossed the room, and hugged him. He felt frail in her arms. Breakable. When had he gotten so small? I forgive you, she heard herself say. I don't forget, but I forgive. Richard held her tight, shaking with silent sobs. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. When he left, Alara stood at the window and watched his car disappear into traffic. Another chapter closing, another piece of her old life falling away. You okay? Kale asked from the doorway. I will be. She turned to him. Tomorrow we leave? Tomorrow we leave. That night, Alara opened the envelope. Inside was a check, $50,000, made out in her name, and a letter in her father's familiar handwriting. She read it once, then burned it in the sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. Some words didn't need to be kept, just acknowledged. They left at dawn before the city fully woke. Kyle drove the truck he'd retrieved from long-term storage, an old Ford Ranger that had seen better days but ran like a dream. Their bags were minimal. Everything they needed was waiting on the mountain. The drive took 6 hours. 6 hours of leaving pavement behind, of trading concrete for trees, of watching the world get bigger and wilder with every mile. When they finally reached the trailhead, Alara stood in the parking lot and breathed in mountain air. It smelled like pine and snow and home. Ready? Kyle asked, shouldering his pack. More than ready. The hike up was easy now, her legs strong from months of work, her breathing even. Her body adapted to the altitude and the terrain. She moved through the forest like she belonged there, because she did. The cabin appeared around a bend in the trail, exactly as they'd left it. Smoke-stained chimney, split-rail fence, the rough beauty of a life built by hand. Alara dropped her pack and just stood there, letting the reality of return wash over her. Missed it? Kyle asked. Like breathing. They spent the rest of the day settling back in, checking traps, restocking the woodpile, making repairs. The work was familiar, comforting, real. That night they sat by the fire and ate venison stew from meat they'd preserved before leaving. What now? Kyle asked. What do you mean? The city's done. The trial's handled. Damien's going to prison. Your father's gone. What happens now? Alara thought about it, about the future stretching ahead, blank and full of possibility. We live, she said. We survive. We build. That's it? That's everything. Kale smiled, actually smiled, full and genuine. Yeah, I guess it is. The seasons changed the way they always did on the mountain, slowly, then all at once. Winter gave way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall again. Alara grew stronger.
Not just physically, though her body became lean and hard from constant work, but mentally, emotionally. She learned to read the mountain's moods, to anticipate storms, to find food in places others saw as barren. She and Kael developed a rhythm. Not partnership, not quite friendship. Something deeper. Something built on shared survival and mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that came from facing death together. They didn't talk about what they were to each other, didn't need labels. They were what they were. 6 months after returning from the city, Alara woke to find fresh snow on the ground and Kael standing at the window with coffee. "Storm coming," he said. "Big one." "How big?" "Week, maybe. Could be longer." Alara joined him at the window. The sky was that particular shade of gray that meant serious weather, but instead of fear, she felt anticipation. "We're ready," she said. "Yeah, we are." They spent the day preparing, extra wood and extra food, securing the cabin against wind, all the small tasks that meant the difference between comfort and crisis. As the first flakes began to fall, Alara stood outside and watched the world turn white. She thought about the woman who'd run into a blizzard in a wedding dress, about how broken she'd been, how desperate, how lost. That woman was dead. In her place was someone new, someone forged in cold and pain and small daily victories, someone who could trap and hunt and fight, someone who'd faced down armed men and federal prosecutors and her own father's disappointment, someone who'd chosen the mountain over comfort and become whole because of it. The snow fell harder. Kael appeared beside her, holding out her coat. "Come inside, it's getting bad." "In a minute." She breathed in the cold air, let it fill her lungs. "I just want to remember." "Remember what?" "This feeling, this moment, being exactly where I'm supposed to be." Kael understood. He always did. They stood together as the blizzard built around them, two people who'd found something like peace in the wilderness. Eventually they went inside, fed the fire, ate dinner, cleaned weapons and told stories, and existed in the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with noise. That night, as wind howled and snow piled against the windows, Alara lay in her bedroll and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The humiliation, the running, the near death, the slow, painful transformation from soft to hard, weak to strong, lost to found. She wouldn't change any of it. Every moment of pain had bought her this peace. Every moment of fear had purchased this certainty. Every moment of doubt had earned this quiet confidence in her own capability. The mountain had stripped her down to nothing and given her the chance to rebuild herself better, stronger, real, and she'd taken it. Across the cabin, Kael was whittling by lamplight. The scrape of blade on wood was familiar, comforting. He glanced over, caught her watching, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. The knowledge that they'd both walked through fire and come out the other side, scarred but unbroken. "Thank you," Alara said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me quit. For teaching me. For seeing what I could become before I did." Kael set down his carving. "You did the work. I just pointed you at it." "Still, thank you." He nodded, went back to whittling. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the fire crackled. And Alara closed her eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who'd finally found where they belonged. The blizzard lasted 9 days. 9 days of being trapped inside, working through their tasks, maintaining the cabin, existing in the small bubble of warmth and safety they'd created. On the 10th day, the storm broke. The sky cleared to brilliant blue. The world was buried under 6 feet of fresh snow, pristine and untouched. Alara and Kael dug out together, working in that synchronized way they'd developed. No wasted movement, no unnecessary words, just the shared purpose of survival. By afternoon, they'd cleared paths to the essential areas. Woodshed, outhouse, trap lines. Trap. "I'm going to check the eastern ridge," Kael said, pulling on his pack. "See if the storm brought down any trees we can use. I'll check the southern traps." They separated at the fork in the trail. Alara moved through the forest with quiet confidence, reading the signs of animal passage, checking each snare with practiced efficiency. 3 of them held rabbits. Good haul. They'd eat well this week. She was resetting the fourth trap when she heard voices. Hikers. Lost, probably. The storm had likely caught them unprepared. Alara approached carefully. Two people, a man and a woman, both in their 20s, expensive gear that looked barely used. The woman was crying. "We're lost," the man said when he saw Alara. "We've been wandering for hours. Our GPS died and we can't find the trail back to—" He stopped, really looking at her, at the rifle, the game bag, the weathered clothes and rough hands. "Do you live up here?" "Yeah." "Oh, thank God. Can you help us? We just need directions back to the main trail. We have a car at the ranger station." Alara looked at them, saw herself a year ago, soft, unprepared, completely out of their depth. "The trail's buried," she said. "You won't make it back today. Maybe not tomorrow either." The woman's crying got louder. "But," Alara continued, "there's a cabin about 2 miles north. You can shelter there until the trail's clear." "Will you take us?" the man asked desperately. Alara thought about it, about Kayel's preference for isolation, about the risk of bringing strangers to their home, but she also thought about the woman who'd stumbled into Kayel's trapline, half dead and desperate, about how one act of reluctant mercy had changed everything. "Yeah," she said, "I'll take you, but there are rules. You follow them or you're back out in the snow. Understood?" They nodded frantically. She led them back to the cabin, helped them settle in the small space. Kyle returned an hour later, saw the strangers, and gave Alara a long look. She shrugged. "Couldn't leave them to freeze." His mouth twitched. "You're getting soft." "I'm getting human. There's a difference." The couple stayed for 3 days, long enough for the trails to clear and the weather to stabilize. Alara watched them struggle with simple tasks, building fire, melting snow for water, existing without phones and Wi-Fi and all the small comforts they took for granted. On the third day, as Kyle led them back down to the ranger station, the woman turned to Alara. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Live like this, so isolated, so hard." Alara looked at the mountain, at the cabin, at the life she'd built from nothing. "You just do," she said, "until one day it's not hard anymore. It's just life." The woman didn't understand, couldn't understand. Maybe she would someday if life pushed her hard enough. Or maybe she'd go back to the city and tell stories about the crazy mountain woman who lived in the wilderness. Either way, it didn't matter. Alara watched them disappear down the trail, then turned back to the cabin. There was work to do, meat to preserve, traps to check, wood to split. The work never ended. That was the point. That night, she and Kyle sat by the fire in comfortable silence. The radio crackled, news from the world below. Something about the Crow family trial, guilty verdicts on all counts, decades of prison time. Alara felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just the distant acknowledgement that justice had been served, whatever that meant. She turned off the radio. "You ever miss it?" Kyle asked. "The city? Your old life?" "No." The answer came immediately. That wasn't life, it was just existing, going through motions, playing a role someone else wrote. "And this? This is real. Hard and cold and unforgiving, but real." She looked at him. "I'd rather struggle with truth than be comfortable with lies." Kale nodded. Understood. They sat until the fire burned low, then banked the coals and prepared for sleep. Alara lay in her bedroll, listening to the mountain sounds, wind through pines, a distant owl, the creak of the cabin settling. She thought about everything she'd lost, the family name, the money, the comfortable future that had been mapped out for her. And she thought about everything she'd gained, strength, capability, the bone-deep certainty that she could survive anything. The trade had been worth it, more than worth it. She'd come to the mountain broken and lost. She'd stayed because piece by piece, through work and pain and small daily victories, she'd built herself into someone whole, someone real, someone free. Outside, the wind picked up. Another storm coming, probably, but the cabin was secure. The supplies were stocked. They were ready. They were always ready. Alara closed her eyes and smiled in the darkness. The mountain had nearly killed her, but instead, it had given her the greatest gift possible, the chance to choose who she wanted to be and the strength to become it. She'd chosen herself, And that choice had made all the difference.